Awesome. All right. So thank you for the intro, Rachel. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I am a nonprofit tech person in my day job, work for this firm called Craftsman based here in Boston. We have staff all over the country. Up until now, really have only presented on nonprofit technology and Salesforce, so it's kind of fun to shift gears to a different kind of system. So let's get into the Enneagram. So another personality typing system. So usually people respond about personality typing to one of two ways. They're either really excited about it, they're really into it, Myers-Briggs, horoscope, disc, bring it all on, or they hate it, they think it's BS, they think it's another way for people to pigeonhole them, make assumptions about them. So if I were in a room with you guys, I would probably ask for like a show of hands of where people fall into which category, but I'll kind of make an assumption that we're probably balanced somewhere between the two. So hopefully there's something in here for everybody. So the Enneagram is another personality typing system. The tradition goes back to the 1960s, although the philosophies behind it there's components from Kabbalah, from Jewish mysticism, as well as from Christianity, from Islam, from Taoism, from Buddhism, ancient Greek philosophy. So the parts of it have been around for a really long time. The symbol itself, so that the thing you're seeing right in the middle, that symbol has roots in antiquity, traced back at least as far as the works of Pythagoras. So a lot of this is pretty old, although the Enneagram in its kind of like formal sense is only from the 1960s. So how does it work? The Enneagram is a 3x3 arrangement of 9 personality types in 3 centers. So there are 3 types in the instinctive center, 3 in the feeling center, 3 in the, instinctive thinking, feeling. Each center has 3 personality types that have in common the assets and liabilities of that center. And then your wing is on either side. So if you are a type 9, your wing is either an 8 or 1, so that's how the wings work. So if you hear folks talking about being like a 7 wing, a 7 type with a 2 wing, that actually is not really how it works. And then there's this other component, which is often called integration or disintegration. And this is one of the, I think, greatest parts of the Enneagram. When you integrate, it means you're in a healthy place or a growing place and you look like the best parts of another type. And when you disintegrate, you're in a stressful place and you might look like the worst parts of another type. So for my type, so I am a type 6, that means that when I'm doing well and I'm integrating, I look like the good parts of a 9. And when I'm not doing as well and disintegrating, I look a little bit more like the worst parts of a type 3. So why do I love this system? So with understanding health and stress within my type, I can see not just what my patterns and my instincts are, but about how I can grow and be healthy. When I understand other people's types, and this includes folks I work with, folks that I'm friends with, I found that my empathy for them and their position really grows. It doesn't mean that I dismiss someone because an action they took is, merely a representation of their type. Really, on the contrary, it means I can contextualize it. If it's a friend or a coworker, I have a better sense of how I might support that person and how I might better respond to that person. A lot of who we are and how we respond to situations around us goes back to some of our earliest childhood patterns and coping mechanisms. Some of who I am as a person at my core is not going to change, right? And some of that can grow and shape and kind of look different over time. So I know that my own growth is going to look a certain way. I'll talk about my type a little bit on the next slide, but just briefly here. So I am a very head-centered person. I likely will always be a very head-centered person. I'm a planner. I'm a worst-case scenario kind of person. So while I think this has downsides for sure, I can be a little bit of a pessimist. It also has upsides in that I'm someone people can count on. I am a great planner, so I'm a good person to plan a trip with, to work on a project with. So the system allows me to be sensitive to my shortcomings while also allowing me to see my growth opportunities. And finally, I find the concepts within the Enneagram really follow pretty accessible psychological concepts. So some of them I mentioned already: coping mechanisms, childhood patterns, triggers, etc. I find that it takes those concepts and puts them into a language that lay people like me and maybe like you can understand a bit better. So I wanted to just talk briefly a little bit more in detail about one of the types. So we only have 10 minutes, so I'm not going to go through all of them. This happens to be mine, so I know it fairly well. So 6s are at the center of the thinking, or the head center, if you recall, the head triad. That means we are really, really heady types, because even with our wings, so our wings are both within the thinking triad. So our wings are either going to be 5 or 7, which are also in the thinking triad. So the wings for 6, so 7s tend to be a bit more social. So 7 is called the enthusiast. These are sort of like the like Jacks or the Janes of all trades of the Enneagram. And 5s are a bit more cerebral and introverted. 5 is called the investigator, and people say about 5s that they would make really great spies. So a 6 with a 5 wing is obviously going to look very different than a 6 with a 7 wing. So I have a 5 wing, so I'm a bit more introverted, although I have some parts of extroversion as well, but a bit more heady. I think probably a lot of folks in tech tend to be maybe a little bit, have some 5 in them. And then I also just wanted to touch a little bit on this levels of development. So the levels of development, and it looks different for each type, but the levels of development provide a framework for seeing how all of the types' different traits fit into a large whole, and understanding the concepts behind the structures of each type. So without these levels, the types seem to be a bit arbitrary. So if you saw on that first page that kind of talked about each of the types, it feels a bit arbitrary. But if we can understand the levels for each type, you can see how the traits are interrelated, and how healthy traits can sometimes deteriorate into average ones, into unhealthy ones. So these really demonstrate how dynamic this system is, how each type has a changing nature of the personality patterns themselves. So people are changing constantly. We're all changing. I mean, I think about who I was, or how I approached the world in February, and then in March when COVID hit, and then like maybe a few months later, after we kind of settled into this strange world we're living in. I think like we're all very dynamic, dynamic beings who kind of shift and change. And part of this structure also just helps us understand where exactly we are within our own type. So how do you type yourself? Is there a test? So the Enneagram is not a 17 magazine quiz where you answer 10 questions and then you finish and that tells you exactly who you are. Part of the reason, I think these testing systems are actually one of the reasons people distrust personality typing. No one likes to be told who they are, right? Because you know yourself best. So what I often tell folks who are interested in learning more about this is that the best way to go about typing yourself is kind of straightforward. You start reading about it. You read about the types, you see which one resonates for you. There's no magic wand. There's definitely folks online, people who are experts in the Enneagram who you could pay to do a typing session. You could do that kind of thing. But really, there's some websites where you can start reading. There's some great books, and you can kind of dive right in. But it really is not there's no magical test that you can take that will tell you exactly who you are. And just some resources, and I think we'll be able to share these out afterwards. So the Enneagram Institute is a great place to start, very clear and straightforward. There's a lot of free information on their website. It goes through the types, the wings, the integration and disintegration points, and then those levels of development. The Wisdom of the Enneagram is my Enneagram Bible. It was my first Enneagram book. They have this there's a little sorting test. It's not like a test that's going to give you a conclusive understanding, but it's a kind of gives you some directions where you might start to figure out your type. But obviously ultimately encourages the reader to delve into each type and see what resonates. Honest Enneagram is a new book out by Sarah Jane Case. She manages a great Enneagram Instagram account called Enneagram and Coffee, which I recommend, and there's a few others on there. Instagram's kind of nice to go and follow some Enneagram accounts and learn more. They will sometimes take a theme and basically like dive into each theme based on the type. So once you know your type, it's kind of fun to read each of those posts. And then lastly, Conscious Construction is a great podcast on the Enneagram. It's hosted by a queer Enneagram expert. And then, spoiler alert, I was interviewed on this podcast last year talking about being a 6 and a community-oriented person and how that interacts with being queer and being Jewish, and that was a lot of fun. So that's all the material I have. Happy to answer questions if we have time.